everyone, and welcome to No Offseason. I'm Zena.
I'm Sabreena Merchant.
And I'm Ben Pickman.
And today on the show, it was a big weekend in women's college hoops. So, who were the big winners? Which teams have sustained their early momentum? And what can this early non-conference play tell us about who's worth keeping on our radar? We're going to get into it in an expanded version of the Sabreena scale. But first, it's time for our segment, Deal or No Deal. And we actually have an update, y'all. We've been keeping tabs on the WNBA CBA negotiations. And well, that November 30th deadline for a deal has come and gone, and there is still no deal. But, as I mentioned, there are updates. Ben, walk us through what's been going on with where things stand.
Yeah, this is another one of those scenarios, Zena, where we have a deal of sorts. Some kind of deal was reached late Sunday night. Too late for my personal liking, and I made that very clear online. There was a deadline on Sunday night at 11:59 p.m. Eastern time between the two sides for the current CBA to expire. And just before that deadline, the two sides did agree to another extension, a second extension in these talks to push back the expiration deadline about 6 weeks to January 9th is the new expiration deadline. And, the two sides have been meeting regularly over the last month. They've been exchanging proposals pretty regularly over the last month. And even over the last week, they continue to meet, even with Thanksgiving interrupting their normal calendar. They met virtually on Saturday. They talked multiple times on Sunday. If you want to understand a little bit of a peek behind the curtain of how we reported this story out and tracked it over the weekend, I brought my computer to playing pickup basketball on Sunday morning. Potentially there was going to be news. I went to a Broadway show on Sunday afternoon. I also had my laptop in a tote bag just in case I needed to run out afterwards. And I brought my computer to dinner. And sure enough, I didn't have to do work at any of those moments or do any writing at any of those moments, as it took until around 10:30 to 11:30 Eastern time for us to get some actual clarity, some more firm, concrete details about proposals, and then eventually this resolution on an extension. So the big picture is, yes, we're pushing the timeline back, we're pushing the deadline back, and the implications here are significant because now we know for sure that the offseason calendar this year is going to look different than what it looked like a year ago.
Right, exactly. So the new deadline is January 9th, but that immediately means that there's a change in that expansion draft. If you guys remember, the Golden State Valkyries had their expansion draft last year on December 6th. Obviously, you can't have an expansion draft if you don't have the CBA in place, right, Ben? Those rules are put in place by the CBA.
Yeah, that is correct. And one of the big things that is going to be discussed or figured out, it seems like, is the core designation, basically the WNBA's franchise tag that, Sabreena and I, and we've all talked about a lot over the course of this show. That's one thing that we'll see what form or what state it is in, how it is applied going forward, what rules, are put in place about how teams can use the core designation. And that is one immediate, designation that might impact the actual terms of the expansion draft or how teams draft, right? So last year, for instance, you were only allowed to use the core once on one UFA, undrafted or unrestricted free agent, rather. And so, look, if the core looks different, then maybe teams draft a little bit differently in the upcoming expansion draft.
Ooh, this is going to be really interesting. Of course, the salary component and how players' salaries grow with the league is still priority for the WNBPA. Of course, we know that prioritization is still priority for the WNBA, making sure that players are here to play in the league. I love the fact that you've kept us up to date with some of the other things, making sure that retired players and retiring players have good benefits. There's quite a few things that are going to be sticking points, not just salary. But January 9th is now our new date that we're looking at. So we'll make sure we'll keep you guys posted on Deal or No Deal. All right, let's shift gears to Team USA women's basketball. The training camp roster was officially announced, and camp is set for December 12th through the 14th, taking place at Duke University. The 18-player roster features a mix of veteran Olympians, which is great. You always want to get your people that have been there and done that before, but then also 10 first-time invitees to the senior team level. So leading the camp is going to be Kara Lawson, the Duke head coach. Makes sense that it's at Duke University. But before we get into the players who are invited, Sabreena, break us down, why this camp? Why are they doing it now? What do you when you're invited and you're one of those 10 first timers, does this mean you actually really have a chance of making it? Like, give us the real deets around this camp.
Right. So USA basketball will be competing in the FIBA World Cup next year in 2026 in September. So that is, if we're in December, that's 9 months away, right? So it's not exactly as if they have a ton of time before that competition happens. And most of their players will be in the WNBA. So you can't have a ton of camps during the WNBA season. So you got to get ready starting now, really. I think that's the point. This is the first camp they've had since the 2024 Olympics. So it's the first time they've been able to bring in a new cycle of players, which is why you see an abundance of first-time invitees to the senior national camp, including, Caitlin Clark, Paige Beckers, Kiki Iriafen, Angel Reese, right? All of these names that have come to define the new wave of players in the WNBA are also part of the new wave of USA basketball. It is important to note that just because people are in this camp, are not in this camp, doesn't mean that they're no longer in the USA pool, right? Like, you look at this list and there's no Asia Wilson, Nafisa Collier, Brianna Stewart, Sabreena Ionescu, people who were part of the Paris Olympic team who we would assume are also going to be part of the World Cup team should they desire. So there's a lot of names that are in consideration that are going to be at Duke for this camp and who are not going to be at Duke for this camp. But I think it is interesting how many new players are in the pool altogether, just because there has been, I think, some sort of staleness in USA basketball, right? Just a lot of people who continue to come back over and over again. And, they hired a new director of the program in Sue Bird. Carol Lawson is a first-time head coach of the program. So there's some newness in the leadership component and now some newness in the overall player pool.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure everyone looked at that roster and was like, where's Asia? What's happening here? Where are the people that got us gold medals for the last, I don't know how many years? Yeah, that is very important to call out that distinction. And I'm really excited, though, to see some of these names. I mean, these are big names, including players that are still technically right now in college. They'll be professional by the time this camp, by the time,
What about Juju Watkins?
Oh, yeah, that's actually true, right.
Yeah.
Juju Watkins will not be a pro by this time that the FIBA Cup is happening, but Lauren Betts, still in college, will be participating in this, and it's in December. Will she be there because she's still playing with the UCLA?
Yeah, so UCLA doesn't have any games that weekend, which is why Lauren Betts is able to attend the full camp. If you look at this and think wait, why isn't Sarah Strong invited? That's because UConn is playing USC during the national team camp. So Juju Watkins is available to go because she's out for the season, not playing. She can attend camp and sort of just get on the radar and potentially be in the mix for when she recovers from her ACL, which should be around March, April, and put her into discussion for potentially competing in September at the World Cup. But that's probably why Sarah Strong isn't there, and that's why somebody like Juju Watkins is able to attend, somebody like Lauren Betts is able to attend, just because of the schedule as it worked out with college basketball.
I think we should also make clear that the schedule of the World Cup next year is also pretty notable, and we've talked about it a bunch throughout the last 5 or 6 months or so, and so there's a lot of players, maybe some of the biggest names, who might elect not to play in the FIBA World Cup next year because it is going to be during the stretch run of the WNBA season, likely just before the start of the WNBA postseason, depending again on when the WNBA schedule begins, when it ends. That's all up for
if there
negotiation,
is a season,
right? As we just talked about. And so, it wouldn't be out of the question for some of the biggest names, the biggest veterans, veteran stars to elect not to play in the FIBA World Cup because, look, they might say, we're going to prioritize our WNBA teams and the stretch runs, and we want to stay healthy and we want to stay fresh, and we don't want to go play in another tournament and risk injury or risk fatigue or anything like that. And so they might say, look, we're going to sit it out. We're going to trust our fellow Americans to help us win this tournament because the talent level is so high that even if the Asia Wilson, Brianna Stewart, Nafisa Colliers do not play, America, the USA, will still be favored in this event. They'll say, hey, we're going to let some of the younger players who maybe their teams are out of postseason contention try and lead the way. I think that's very much on the table here. And so, again, that's another reason why I think there is so much of an incentive to get younger players in, even with some of the veterans electing not to participate.
Yeah, man, this is interesting. I don't know if you guys remember Asia Wilson having to win the WNBA championship in 2022 and then immediately go into the FIBA World Cup and win gold. I mean, that's a lot of work on your body.
And the most outstanding player of the tournament in the process.
And most outstanding player of the tournament. Exactly. I mean, it was surreal how much how big of a run that was, but how much of a toll that can also take on your body. So yeah, that's going to be very interesting to see. Sabreena, I'm looking at this list, and of course, we've called out some of the younger names, the new names, and this is fun. This is fresh, especially for folks that have just gotten into the women's basketball space, and they're like seeing their faves be a part of this new element of women's basketball in Team USA. Looking at some of the names that were invited to camp, Kara Lawson's behind this, right? She's getting to make these decisions as to who she wants there. What can you say about the people that were invited, what she's trying to do and what she's trying to inflect in the new era, I guess, of Team USA with her at the helm?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't want to repeat myself, but I feel like the names of people who are not invited, like not, I shouldn't say not invited, they were all invited, but who are not participating is just as important
Sure.
as the list of players who is participating. Because again, I can't imagine a national team without Brianna Stewart, Nafisa Collier, Asia Wilson, right? Like
Right,
they're going to
right.
be on the team if they want to be on the team. So it's not as if like there are 12 spots available to these 18 players who are participating in camp. I'd say it's much closer to 6 or 8. And I think it's great that, this young generation is all part of the discussion. Like in addition to the names we mentioned, you've got like Cameron Brink, Sonia Citron, right? Like Veronica Burton, who I should note
Rakia Jackson.
just won 3x3 gold medal for the AmeriCup. I think it's
Yes.
interesting that she was in the 3x3 pool, on that 4-person team and also in this 5-on-5 national team. You notice a person like Alicia Gray or Shakira Austin, they're no longer seemingly putting themselves in the 5-on-5 pool, focusing on the 3x3, whereas Veronica Burton is still, managing both lanes. We'll see, how that ends up happening. I would imagine 3x3 is probably an easier chance for her to make the Olympics, but that's a discussion for later. I think, this is just like an information gathering time, right? Like you want to know, one, like what people's commitment to USA basketball is. Like that with Team USA, so much of it is like, you got to be there every summer, right? Like you got to be there at the
Yeah.
camps. I know that this is something that has sort of like gone by the wayside in recent years where like players have just gotten so much seniority that they no longer have to come all the time. I think like they want to make sure that they're recapturing like attendance as part of the program, right? Like it's important that you are around and, committing to this process like during the off seasons. And then they just kind of want to see what they have, right? Like we talked ad
Yeah.
nauseum before the Paris Olympics about how Caitlin Clark never got to go to a senior national camp and that's why she wasn't on the team, right? And so this is your chance. Like if your next camp is during the Final Four, maybe Lauren Bess is unavailable then, but you know what she looks like now if you have a camp in December, right? And like this is a good time for Juju to get into the fray before, all of her obligations come. So I think it's just interesting like how young they've gone. Not to say that there aren't older players, like you've still got Brittany Griner, you've still got somebody like Bree Jones who was on the 2022 World Cup team. But I am very intrigued by all of the young blood on this roster, and I do wonder how young it's going to skew for the 2026 Olympic or 2026 World Cup team based on the considerations that Ben brought up too. Like if it's going to be a lot of players who don't make the playoffs, maybe because then they don't have to worry about like setting themselves up for the WNBA postseason.
Yeah, this is going to be really, really interesting, especially because we've seen, particularly on the men's side, for the teams that did not feature the big time names at these international competitions, they didn't fare too well. It was a new era for them, and then trying to figure out who's the star, who's going to step up. You don't have those kind of questions when Nafisa Collier and Asia Wilson and Brianna Stewart are available. You may have those when some younger folks are. Now tasked with being the new faces and the new blood, I guess, out on the floor for Team USA. So this is gonna be really interesting. And I'm happy you brought up the AmeriCup. I wanted to also shout out the women and men perfect record, 10-0 at the 2025 FIBA 3x3 AmeriCup. Alicia Gray, MVP honors as well. So shout out to Alicia
Game winning free
Gray.
throw is a little anticlimactic, but a gold medal is a
Yes.
gold medal.
Exactly. A gold medal is a gold medal. I know when the game ends on free throws, you're like, "Eh." But shout out to them for cleaning up and cleaning house with the 3x3 AmeriCup. All right, let's round out to some women's hoops on the other side of this break. All right, guys. Women's hoops in college is still obviously happening. I know we just spent a lot of time talking about Team USA and obviously what's going on with the WNBA, but as I say every week, college hoops wants its time, and that's why it is time to check in on our special, but this time very spacious version of the Sabreena scale. All right, so last week, there were so many great tournaments happening. It's Thanksgiving week, and so there's lots of different challenges and cups and I don't know, different ways. I felt like there were a lot of C words like Cancun and coconut and all these different things happening
I
around.
thought you were going to say challenges to how to watch these games, Zena, and
Oh,
different
that too.
because I
How
think
many
we should talk
subscriptions
about
did you
that.
re-up last week too? Like, I'm like, had Flo College telling me like, we need a new credit card. I'm like, oh, okay, let me get my life together. Okay.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
realized
it
my
was
Flow
it was
subscription expired on the Friday because I guess I had just like
yes,
started it last Thanksgiving. So
correct. Same with me. Same with me. They're like, you need to re-up. And I was like, oh shoot, let me get my life together. But there were some really great games as well. Particularly if you're a Texas Longhorn fan, like you got to see some awesome play. Texas was in the first ever women's players era in Vegas, and they took down UCLA and South Carolina. The South Carolina game was a different level of excitement. UCLA, they made a run for it at the end. They made it interesting at the end, but Texas was handing them their butts pretty early in that first half. But this was a tournament win that came with a huge reward purse. $1 million. That's insane. Like, that's some serious bucks. And also a massive ring. I don't know if you guys watched the ceremony at the end of the tournament. Rory Harmon was holding up this ring that literally went down her hand. It was crazy. I hope we have a picture of that we can splice in. But Sabreena, Texas, as a result, winning this tournament, but also beating huge opponents in South Carolina and UCLA, they went from number 4 on your Sabreena scale to number 2. So I'm going to go ahead and assume this tournament was massive for that.
yeah, it was really hard not to put them at number 1, actually, just because of the quality of opponents that they beat. And I thought about it a lot. I mean, basically, if you're going to beat UCLA and South Carolina in 1 week and that's not enough to get you to number 1 in the country, like what is enough to get you to number 1 in the country is sort of how I thought about it. But I can't really blame UConn for not being in the tournament. Like, I don't know how the logistics of all of this works. And, you know, they obviously try to schedule pretty well during the non-conference portion too. So for now, I look at Texas, I look at South Carolina. Like, I didn't think there was a ton of separation between those two teams. Obviously, you mentioned Rory Harmon winning MVP because of a, game-winning jumper that she hits with about under a second left in that championship game. So,
Nice
pretty nip and tuck the whole way between those two SEC rivals.
Yep.
I think I look at the Huskies and I just see like an abundance of depth that's just not yet on Texas and not on South Carolina. And that's sort of why I kept them in the number 1 spot, because you have all of these options that you can go to. Texas, I think, could still get there because they are still playing without 2 of their rotation players. They didn't have freshman Leah Crump, and they didn't have their backup point guard, Brianna Preston. Although, why you need a backup point guard when Rory Harmon is the best point guard in America, according to Vic Schaefer,
And plays 40 minutes.
Open question. Whether she's
Right.
the best point guard in Texas, really, I think, is a fun task.
Yeah.
But we'll see when Texas plays TCU again. But yeah, I think Texas was just. I love watching Rory Harmon be aggressive offensively. I think that just adds a totally different element because Madison Booker is going to be looking to score. They got these great contributions from Jordan Lee and Justice Carlton, and I think their center rotation is as good as it was last year, even without Taylor Jones. Bria Cunningham's been a seamless fit there. Kyla Oldacre looks better than she did last year. She's perfectly happy coming off the bench and just playing whatever role she needs to, whether that's closing the game, whether that's playing more minimal minutes. But Texas had like a really good 7-player rotation, and once more players get added back to it, I think, you could see them really competing with UConn. But for now, they do move up to 2 ahead of the teams they beat, obviously, but I just couldn't quite put them ahead of the Huskies because of the overall depth of talent that UConn has that currently, at least until the injuries subside, Texas can't quite match yet.
And
Yeah,
UConn beat Michigan. Like, I mean, that was for me.
Oh, yeah,
Right, but
when
that
I
was
was
2
putting
weeks ago.
together. Right. But for me, like in the ranking, like as I was looking at quality wins, UConn beating Michigan, is a very high quality win. It's not like they've played all nobodies
Right,
to
but
open
Texas
the season.
beating South Carolina on a neutral site versus UConn beating Michigan at home, basically,
No,
Yeah.
totally fair. I mean, that's why. I mean, I struggled. I had the same exact feeling and a lot of the same thought process. To me, if UConn doesn't have that Michigan win on their resume, I think I would have put Texas over them in my AP ranking this week. Also, UConn has just been so dominant, like every time out. But I think it is a very, very tough call this week.
You guys talk about depth. I mean, that's huge. Of course, the fact that UConn has it is amazing. I felt as if every time a Texas player went down, we all held our breaths. Like there's no one else available. Like Kyle Oldick or get up. You know what I mean? It was different moments throughout this weekend that you saw. Texas is strong right now, but they definitely need players to come back to be able to round them out as the season progresses. But particularly, let's talk about that Texas UCLA game because I don't know. I was looking at Corey Close like, girl, are we regressing? Are we getting back to get Lauren the ball? Like, what's happening right now with this offense? Let's talk a little bit about what you guys saw in terms of the strengths of how Texas was able to minimize Lauren Betts's just her impact over the course of the game. Only 8 shots attempted. I mean, she finished fine in terms of 50% from the floor, but it just felt as if she was a little bit nullified in her ability to impact the game, particularly from an offensive perspective. What do you guys see out there from Texas?
Well, I just thought Texas' ball pressure was really good, preventing the ball from even getting to Lauren. It wasn't so much their doubling or, one-on-one defense on Betts.
Yeah.
It was, Kiki Rice is turning the ball over before you can even get the ball past half court, or even Charlie Sledger-Walker had some difficulty with her decision-making there. So you'd think a team with 2 veteran point guards like UCLA would be a little bit more equipped for the pressure. They were not in the first half. UCLA, another team that is dealing with absences, right? Like they don't have 2 of their front court rotation in Tamia Gardner and Sienna Betts, who you imagine would help with those high-low connections with Lauren Betts that they were not really able to get going in that game.
Right.
But yeah, to me, it was a perimeter defense masterclass from Texas that really set the tone in that first half and just got UCLA out of rhythm, allowed Texas to play at its tempo. And you saw UCLA at least come back. Like this was something that was not at all happening in that game against UConn in the Final Four. Like for the first half, it was, oh my God, this is another Bruins just falling flat on their face on national TV. But for them to at least have that comeback, to pull it within 4 in the fourth quarter, you're like one Gianna Neepkins 3 away from this being really, really interesting at the end of the game. Didn't get there, but I think the fight was at least more hopeful for UCLA going forward than what we saw at least in the Final Four last season, and then their next 2 wins over Duke and Tennessee, like a really convincing win over Tennessee. I thought just gives a little bit more optimism if you're just worried about UCLA being bridesmaid over and over again against big teams. But yeah, I think it was a perimeter defense win for Texas more than anything.
Well, in that first quarter, UCLA turned the ball over 7 times. I mean, it was rough to watch. Ben, what'd you see?
Well, and they're just not forcing turnovers, and they're not forcing it at the same clip that they did last year. And so it's the combination of the two, turning the basketball over, as we saw against Texas with the 20 turnovers, and also not getting steals the way that they maybe have in the past. That's a bad combination, obviously. They're also not getting the free throw line as much as they did
That's a great point.
A season ago. And that is something to watch for as well going forward.
Now, in this game, UCLA loses to Texas 65-76. I missed out on sharing the actual final score. You mentioned that comeback. I mean, UCLA won the second half. They outplayed Texas in that second half, but Texas had done their work early, and that's what they say. Get your work done early. You'll be able to cruise towards the back end. But that 24-7 run in the second half made you go, okay, UCLA is not laying down. They end up beating Tennessee. I believe it was 99-77. I don't have that score in front of me directly, but I remember that from watching. The Lauren Betts scare that happened in Texas. She collides with Booker, comes down to the floor. It looks awkward. She goes back to the locker room. I believe she walked back to the locker room. Do we have any concerns about that? She did come back in the game and didn't seem to be bothered by it, but any concerns about how the main centerpiece of should be the centerpiece, in my opinion. Do we have any concerns about what that fall may have done for her game?
Well, I mean, she did play against Tennessee, and she looked totally fine in that game on Sunday. I know she sat out against Duke, and the next day, if it were the championship game, I imagine they would have tried harder to get her back in the game, but it wasn't. So, no, just based on watching her move on Sunday, like she had a full practice on Saturday for UCLA, had no restrictions on her minutes on Sunday. I think the larger question with Lauren Betts is just her numbers haven't looked as good as they did last season, and I think part of that is just how defenses are playing UCLA this year. Like there is a real committed effort to, you are going to have to do something other than get the ball to Lauren every single time. And UCLA, to their credit, like brought in perimeter players who don't have to give the ball to Lauren every time, right? Like you're seeing what Gianna Neepkins can do. Gabriella Hawkes, I think, has taken another step, that 29 points against Tennessee.
29 points, that's huge.
She's been excellent this season, shooting over 40% from three-point range. And then Charlie Sledger-Walker coming back from her ACL tear, just another player who can do a little bit driving and score from the perimeter. So like they have ways where they're not entirely dependent on Lauren Betts in a way that they were last season. Like everything was created by the gravity of Lauren Betts. And that's not to say that Lauren Betts drawing in the defense still doesn't help what UCLA is trying to do. I just think that the offense can afford to be a little bit more versatile than it was last season because of the depth of talent that they have on the perimeter. And you're going to see that reflected in Lauren's box score numbers because they're just not as prolific as they were a season ago. But I still think it's like really necessary to point out that like everything still focuses on Betts, right? Like the fact that she is there, the
Yeah.
fact that she is drawing in the defense, running the floor hard, boxing out, even if the rebounds are not coming to her, like she still to me is the most pivotal piece of what UCLA is doing, even if it's not showing up on the box score. But the fact that it's not showing up on the box score is a little interesting to start the season.
Yeah.
Uh,
Not enough
I do
attempts.
think you mentioned Gabriella Jaquez. Like to me, the positive, the plus is that she has had opportunity over the last 2 games to really shine. Like if I'm her agency, if I'm Gabriella Jaquez's camp and I'm looking for NBA draft or WNBA draft tape to put on film and to send to teams and to make sure teams see and watch, like I'm putting the last 2 games against Duke and Tennessee on tape, and I'm making sure that everyone has a copy of it because, as you mentioned, Sabreena, the 29
Mm.
points, the 23 points against Duke, like those are 2 of the better games offensively of her entire college career. And that is no short college career. And we have seen, as you mentioned, the 3-point shooting improve. I mean, she's a much improved corner 3 shooter this year from the left side, from the top of the arc as well, left side too. She's just creating opportunities. She's making up open opportunities. She's aggressive. She's playing with confidence. We talked about it on our draft show about a week ago, I guess it was. It feels like more than a week ago that like she does so many things well, but she might not be a star. Like she might not excel at one particular skill. But if she's able to create on offense and to make shots the way that she has over the past 2 or 3 games, like her stock could really be one of the risers over the college season if she continues to play the way she has.
I don't think WNBA teams
Kind
have to worry about tape because so many of them were already
Sure.
in person at the UCLA game. I can tell you
Good point.
that. Scouts from at least half the
Okay.
teams, I think, were in attendance watching this
Ooh.
Gabriella Jaquez performance. Corey Close actually likened her game to sort of a Bridget Carlton post game, which I
Hmm.
thought was an interesting comparison. Just like maybe not your number one option scoring, but like you put her on the court and you're confident that she's going to do everything right and give you a little bit of everything. And she just keeps getting better and better every season, which, we're seeing again in her senior year at UCLA.
I kind of love that the Hawkeses are doing a great job right now, playing all the roles. At the time that we're recording this, Jaime Jaquez, Gabriela Jaquez's older brother that plays for the Miami Heat, is leading in the Sixth Man of the Year conversation. So that could be something that Gabriella can also look towards, look forward to in the WNBA. Or her star might be a little bit brighter than where her brother's is right now. But I do want to continue to talk about Texas. We'll put UCLA to the side right now. I do think there's more players that are starting to step up for UCLA. And as you mentioned, Sabreena, they've got some injuries that they've got to be able to overcome before we can see a full picture of them. But Texas, they went on and beat South Carolina in a very riveting game. Ended up winning 66-64 against South Carolina, excuse me, on Friday night. Was it Friday night? I was coming
Thursday.
off
It
a
was
plane.
Thanksgiving Day.
No, it's
Thursday
Thursday night.
night.
Which,
It was-
which can I say? This is the problem with this tournament right off the bat. Like,
Yeah,
what are we
okay.
doing playing South Carolina and Texas on Thursday night, Thanksgiving night? Like, I understand that there's a big money purse at play here, but like, it's Thanksgiving night, and this is supposed to be this. Arguably, this is the best game of the early season. And how many people? I haven't seen a rating on this game yet. So admittedly, like if there's 10 million people that watched it, I will gladly take back
There were
this
not 10 million
comment.
people who watched it, I can tell you that.
Yeah, I don't think so.
If
And
it
there
overlapped with
certainly were
Chiefs
not
Cowboys, that didn't happen.
right.
Oh.
But like who is watching? Like who's watching this game live unless you are a true women's college basketball diehard or a fan of either of these teams? Like move this
Or
tournament.
us.
Move this
The
tournament.
media.
Put it on another weekend in December. Put it in another weekend in November. More people will watch. More people, I have to imagine, will go. Like, I understand it. And it was the second half of the Players Era men's tournament that started earlier in the week, right? So, like, I get that you want some Players Era synergy and you have the networks lined up. I think this was a true TV game. TNT had the broadcast for the men's side. But, like, that just irked me
Are you
Um,
just anti-feast week in general, Ben?
I mean, I am a little bit. Like, I don't blame
Okay.
teams for not playing elite opponents if you elect not to schedule hard during Thanksgiving week.
Mm.
And I also am against, like, this should be one of the showcase games of the season, and I just think
They'll
it
play
gets
each other
buried.
during the
Yeah.
Like,
SEC schedule. Don't worry. It's going to
right,
happen.
right. And that I can get Sabreena, can you guarantee that? I can guarantee that. Looking at the
Yeah, it's
schedule
going to
and the
happen.
two, yeah. But like we should make it more accessible for people to watch games and put big games on at a good time. And Thursday night, Thanksgiving night is not that. You're going up against an NFL game. It was Ravens Bengals actually, Sabreena, if we're going to
I forget.
correct you
I
on the
didn't see. I didn't
football
watch this
game.
game live, so I don't actually know what time it was happening. Yeah.
Oh, I watched it live. I was not in the football mix at all. I was at
Mm,
home, my mom, my sister, and I ate Thanksgiving meal. I fell asleep, put an
yeah.
alarm on because I knew these games were happening. I woke up and like watched them. So I was one of those people that was like locked in, knowing that I was going to watch that. But again, as you mentioned, Ben, that's a very small percentage of people that would have been more concerned about, let me get my post eating nap in and then let me go get this women's basketball fix in. But they gave me a fix, okay? Texas gave South Carolina their first loss of the season. And man, Rory Harmon, uh, just she's been so fun to watch. Sabreena, you talked about her aggression. I love the fact that Madison and Rory, they now have a trust in each other. Like I saw Madison pass the ball off at the top of the key to Rory Harmon several times and kind of just like was steady, ready to in case she needed a kick out or anything. And she just allowed Rory to penetrate into the paint, get her little, mid-range off. It was just fun watching the two of them cook. And we've been seeing it now, what, 2 years, 3 years? And it's just been like them growing up together. They work so well off of each other. I think at one point when Madison first came, remember she had to, because Rory got hurt, she had to become a point guard. And so it's so nice to now see Madison Booker again back in that secondary playmaker role alongside of Rory Harmon. And the other person I just want to shout out really quickly, number 11, Justice Carlton. Y'all know I love Justice Carlton. I love her so much. And she was, I think, pivotal in that UCLA game, but also being able to make her mark in that South Carolina game as well. I'm talking a lot about Texas. Let's flip it first to South Carolina. Ben, I'll ask you first. Looking at this game, it was incredibly competitive. South Carolina was up in this game. They felt in control, especially going into halftime. You felt like, okay, the things look a little bit interesting, but I remember turning to my mother and literally saying, third quarter, South Carolina. It's about to go off, y'all. It's about to pop off. It's going to be a thing. And overall, Texas was able to withstand any type of runs, and it became back and forth, back and forth. Texas was able to turn South Carolina over, force some awkward shots out of them. But what'd you see out of South Carolina that you liked, or that you were like, this is going to need some adjustments?
I mean, I don't know what the adjustment for what I'm about to say is, because the thing that I just continue to think about with South Carolina is they're so reliant on their five starters. Their five starters have played 100 minutes together this season, and when they have played, they have been elite. Like, they are one of the best
Yeah.
starting lineups in the country. They are the best starting lineup in the SEC of any starting lineup who has played more than 50 minutes per game this year. But across the country, only TCU's starting lineup has played more minutes in their 8 games than South Carolina's. And that is a big change from the South Carolina team we saw last year, right? Think about last year's South Carolina team. They averaged more than 40 bench points per game. That was first in the country a season ago. This year, they're averaging just over 17 points off the bench per game. We saw it against Texas. They had two bench points in their game. In the Final Four victory that South Carolina had over Texas, South Carolina's bench scored 35 points, right? It doesn't come all down to that. And obviously roster turnover, development of players in the transfer portal, that is a natural part of where we're at in college athletics right now. But the depth and the high quality depth is just not yet there for South Carolina. That's not to say it won't be there, but this is a team that is very reliant on its starters. And if you rattle off some of the other teams we've talked about, UCLA and Texas being among them, Like, those are teams that are really deep. And to me, the thing that was most impressive about Texas pulling off this victory is they did it without Crump and Preston, right? Two players who are very important to
Mm.
their success and have gotten off to good starts this season. And so that Texas was a little undermanned, didn't have the depth, and was still able to win. That is a big plus. And South Carolina's lack of depth, I think, again, revealed itself in this game, and it's something to watch for going forward.
There's just like a big
Think
Chloe Kitts shaped hole in their offense. You know?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's crazy to
And it
think
was
that
in-
if Chloe Kitts hadn't suffered that ACL injury, like would Joyce Edwards still be coming off the bench? You know, would she still be this super sixth woman? Considering how incredible she's been, like that's you talk about those bench points
Yeah.
against Texas in the Final Four, like that's Tessa Johnson and Joyce Edwards, right? And they're both starting now. So, I mean, that's just what happens at South Carolina. You build like your reserves through the freshman class, and like they get better, and then they become starters, and like that's what Ayla McDowell and Agat McKee are gonna have to do. Like they just have to be better than they have been so far. You know, they've been good against lesser competition, but like, I barely even noticed McDowell in some of these bigger games. And she was
Yeah.
one of the top 5, top 10 recruits in the country coming in. Like, she just has to be better. They just need something of a punch coming off the bench. You know, like if a coach is going to foul out, what's coming off the bench? Like, is it Adele Tack? Like, they talk about her very lovingly as like the leader of the team and like a, you know, motivational perspective. But like, what has she performed on the court so far? Like, there's
Yeah.
so many players who have high pedigrees on the South Carolina bench who just haven't lived up to them so far. Like whether that's Dowda, whether that's Maddie McDaniel, whether that's those freshmen. And they have a long time, right, before we get to March and it becomes like gut check time. But it's just, I don't entirely blame South Carolina. They put together this roster thinking that Chloe Kitts, an all SEC performer last year, was going to be part of the team. And you put her on the team and all of a sudden they have a rotation that I think is totally fine to compete with anybody in the country. But it's a big loss. And it's not like there's a trade deadline in college. Like you can't just pick up somebody mid-season. So it's going to have to come from internal development.
There were moments where, Talk got some blocks that got me hyped, right? But it wasn't enough. There wasn't enough production. The fact that there was only 3 made threes in this entire game is crazy. Like that just gives you a sense of just how much up and down there
It's the
was, how
SEC.
much it's the SEC for sure. Absolutely. We expected that out of Texas. I think I definitely expected a little bit more
Texas
out of
only had one player even attempt a 3 in that game.
Crazy.
Right, exactly. Jordan
Yeah.
Lee attempted 6, made the 1. But we knew their offense has always been around their ability to get into spots and get into holes and utilize their bigs. But South Carolina is also missing some significant outside shooting. Whether it was, Chloe Kitts even put up threes last year, but Tessa Johnson is one of those people I'm looking at that they're going to need, I'm saying we're like, I'm part of South Carolina. They're going to need a more production out of her from the perimeter, especially on those kickouts. We know that she can do that mid-range, which I loved her one dribble pull-ups, but a little bit more production out of that. And we'll see what happens with McDowell, Maddie McDaniel, even like you're just not feeling them when they are substituted in. And that's a really good call out, Ben. All right, guys, we'll see. I'm sure South Carolina's going to bounce back. Like, I'm not too concerned about them. But if there's anything about this game that you can take away in terms of things that South Carolina can look forward to as they get into the SEC, Ben, you mentioned being able to get more production out of their bench. Sabreena, anything on your end?
I'm just so impressed with how Medina Ocote has played the start of the season. You know, she is
Yeah.
dramatically better than she was even a year ago at Mississippi State. Like, what a tremendous decision to decide to transfer to South Carolina. And the fit is just perfect on both sides. You know, I talked to a WNBA front office personnel this weekend who said, like, would it be crazy to draft Ocote over Lauren Betts just because of what she does dominantly? Like, she can
Ooh.
see, like, just back her defender down.
Seals so
her
beautifully.
mobility is really good
Yes.
defensively. You just feel her size all the time when she's on the court. To me, it's like a bridge too far, but like I understand the thought process at the very least.
Mhm.
And I think just how good that she's been over the first 8 games for South Carolina, to think how much better she can continue to get under this developmental system in South Carolina. I'm really excited to see how that pans out, especially because it's not like she's in a new conference. Like, she knows these opponents already, so it's not
Yeah.
a full learning curve. That to me is really interesting. And then just like I want to see how Tanaya Latson continues to adapt to this, because it's still been an adjustment process for her, you know, being the leading scorer in the country a year ago and then coming into
Yeah.
an offense where there's a lot more balance. So can she still dial up like the 28 points per game Tanaya Latson that we saw at Florida State? Because sometimes they're going to need that, right? And I'm just interested to see how that fares against SEC opponents.
Yeah, completely missed on the fact of Tanai Latson being another person that could produce a lot more threes. I believe what she was 40% from three um last season. Performed pretty well from outside as well. So it's like there's opportunity here. It's a long season, folks. So we'll see what happens in terms of the production as folks get more acclimated into South Carolina. But for now, with the new faces and new places, that game was awesome. Thank you, Texas. Thank you, South Carolina, for being able to give me that basketball fix on Thanksgiving. Okay, LSU. I know. A lot of y'all are like, they ain't playing nobody. Why are we talking about this? Well, LSU, yes, they have not been playing the most competitive of opponents, but they made history over the weekend by extending their streak of 100-point games to 8. Now, they had tied it up. It was 7 previously, obviously, and now with 112-35 win over Washington State, they captured the Reef Division title at the Paradise Jam in St. Thomas. So while on quote unquote vacation, they made history there. I thought it was really cool that uh, the sixth game streak of 100 points or more previously was made by Louisiana Tech, where Kim Mulkey was playing, or while Kim Mulkey was playing. So that's pretty cool. They went on to win the national championship that year. And now Kim Mulkey's at the top of this streak. And she actually, when asked about it, was like, oh, I didn't know. That's not something that was on our radar. We don't talk to the kids about it, X, Y, and Z. But there is conference play ahead. And the SEC don't look like Washington State, y'all. We just talked about Texas. We just talked about South Carolina. This hot start, can it translate? That's the biggest question. That is always the question for LSU. It feels even louder this year because the competition seems even lower. But Sabreena, there is a reason to that Kim Mulkey kind of expounded upon when asked about it recently. Like, if you're a fan listening to us and you're like, why is LSU playing nobody? Meanwhile, Texas just played UCLA and South Carolina and UConn played Michigan. Like, why are they in the top 5 in the country and not playing big time opponents?
Right. So this isn't like the best way to classify opponents, but I like to use the Her Hoop Stats like net rating filter. And LSU hasn't played a single team that's ranked in the top 100 of the 360 plus Division I teams during the start of the season. So I'm not saying that they have to be playing like, top 5 teams, but like not even in the top 100 over their first
That's
8
bad.
games. So if it seems like we're being a little dismissive of what they've done so far, that is why. What's funny is because like their best non-conference game was supposed to be against Duke, and Duke has just looked like an absolute tire fire. So like, how good is that game even going to be later this week? But yeah, they haven't played a real game of consequence over the start of the non-conference season, and that is by design. This is what Kim Mulkey likes to do. She likes to get her team just really confident in itself, learning basically how to play with each other without too much competition from the opposition over the start of the season. And it's not as if it's been unsuccessful, right? Like I'm looking at the schedule that they had in 2022, 2023 when they won their national title. And again, they had one opponent who was in the top 100, the 88th ranked team in net rating during their first stretch of the season. I think they also played Tulane this season, so it's probably just a regular game that they play against an intrastate, team. This is just what Kim Mulkey does. Like they're going to get a lot of tests during the SEC season. Those are going to happen, right? You got Texas, you got South Carolina, you got Oklahoma, you got all those other teams in that conference. So it's not as if they won't be able to challenge themselves before March comes around. Well, Mulkey's of the belief that we just don't need to challenge ourselves for 4 months. We can do it for 2 months. And that is a theory that she has. That's a theory that, some coaches don't have. It makes the first part of the season, for me, a lot less interesting to watch LSU because it's almost like they're scrimmaging every night. But hey, this is their practice. This is what they're doing. And credit to them, they're not taking any of these opponents lightly. They're actually kicking butt like they're supposed to. So the fact that they have scored 100 points in 8 consecutive games is, a testament because like obviously it hasn't been done before, but I'm not reading into it as like, oh, I think they're now a better SEC team than Texas or South Carolina because they've done that. Like they still have a lot to prove, which again is their point. Like they will get a chance to prove all that come January.
And it is just such a big confidence builder for players on the team, or it can be, right? If you look at it, because they're playing a much softer schedule than their peers, and, Sabreena cited her hoop stats numbers, the NCAA came out with their first net rankings on Monday, and you can see that LSU rather, of teams in the top 15 right now of the net, like they have played by far the weakest schedule, the softest, worst strength of schedule. So far, they have 7 quad 4 wins for whatever that is worth on December 1st, which is a lot of quad four victories. Not going to help them in resume talk come NCAA tournament. But like of their roster right now, 11 players are averaging between 12 and 25 minutes per game to start the year. And that is,
That's big.
that's big, right? You're getting
Mhm.
reserves an opportunity to play. You're getting reserves an opportunity to gain confidence as a coaching staff. You're getting an opportunity to play with different lineup combinations. You're getting an opportunity to see who fits well with who might not, fit as well with someone else. Like you're starting to at least learn something. And while the
Mhm.
opponent is not as, you're not learning as much if you were playing potentially a Texas or UConn or South Carolina, you're at least getting some film, some teaching tape that you can build off of. And so that is another big plus if you're the LSU coaching staff about scheduling the way that they do. As Sabreena said, not as exciting, tougher to read into it, harder to rank that team, and
Yeah.
maybe not as indicative. Like they might have a rude awakening come SEC tournament play, but also they might be bought in more, or players might have more confidence because they've played relatively easy opponents, and
Right.
that might help them as well in the long run. It's just a wait and see, and that really is the reality of where LSU is at right now.
Yeah, I love this variety in coaching approaches. This aspect of building confidence. Ben, you just mentioned the fact that South Carolina's bench needs to produce more. They need to be more confident when they're coming out onto the floor to replace their reserves. And in this system with LSU and Kim Mulkey's system, those players are coming off the bench knowing what they're capable of, knowing what they can do against an opponent that they know they're better than or they feel that they're better than. And it gives them those reps to be able to build that confidence. And then, as you mentioned, the lineup aspect, bench players coming on with starters, being able to try some things out without it being a huge risk. That's massive. And the reason why this is so important for LSU is the fact that they have a lot of new faces. They quite literally have 8 new faces on their roster and only 2 players that had significant playing time last season returning to the team. And so Kim Mulkey mentioned this. She did not expect this team to gel as well as they have in their undefeated 8-0 start so far this season. She said, maybe I would have scheduled better, but let's just be real. This is what Kim Mulkey has always done. If you're new
Yeah.
to this, Kim Mulkey is true to this, okay? This is not anything new. She has always done this, and I respect it. It's a different type of approach, and I think the only negatives that you can kind of see is, 1, it is hard to evaluate their team. 2, there is this risk of basically playing no one until crunch time matters, and how are you going to respond? I would say UConn sometimes feels that way outside of non-conference, right? Like playing in the Big East right into the tournament. But then also the separate factor, not team related, it's always a little bit difficult to evaluate
Right.
talent, right? Like I feel like multiple LSU players have dealt with not being center of attention early in the season because their team isn't playing anyone. It's hard to evaluate how a Flau'jae Johnson will translate to the WNBA when the folks that she's playing against are not going to the WNBA, right? And so I think those are the main negatives there, but it's an interesting tactic. And as Sabreena called out, like it's worked. It
It,
has worked.
It
it's
also
so
always
interesting
hurts their
also.
NCAA tournament seeding too, because they're never going to be a 1 seed because they don't have the
Correct.
quality wins that
Yeah,
other
that's a
teams
good
do
point.
unless they just roll through the SEC schedule. Like when they won a national title, they were number 3 seed and like it worked out for
Yeah.
them just fine. But they were a 3 seed, in Angel Reese's last season too, and that meant that they had to go through
Yeah.
UCLA and Iowa just to get to the Final
And
Four, and they
they're
did not get
always
through Iowa.
offended. You can always see it. Like, whenever they call it out, they're always like, I can't believe we got ranked at that. It's like, well, what do you expect? What do you expect? I don't
It,
understand. Where is this coming from?
it's also just like the conversation that is happening across a lot of college sports right now about how do you schedule and what does that mean for where you stand in the
Mhm.
postseason. I know, I'm not the biggest college football viewer out there, but I know in the SEC right now, Texas football is very much trying to make a case for them to make the college football playoff. And one of the things that, people who are a part of that program are saying publicly is, look, we might have 3 losses, but one of them is to Ohio State, which is the number 1
Right.
team in the country. And we lost to them in week 1. And so, if we
Oof.
had we chosen to schedule a different opponent that we would have likely beaten, then we would have only had 2 losses and we would have been a playoff team. And so should we be penalized for playing and losing to Ohio State when, we gave viewers an incredible game to open the college football season? Like,
Mm.
yeah, we also, you talk about losers here, Zena. I think we like the viewing public, again, we are also losers here because LSU has
Yeah.
basically taken them out from playing a high-profile
Yep.
non-conference game.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The fans are like, damn it, LSU, get it together. We want to see some competition. But hey, if you're an LSU fan, I'm sure you ain't too mad about your team having a 31-point differential on average so far this season. Okay, let's keep it moving. Last piece of history here that we want to talk about. If you guys remember the last show that we did before the Thanksgiving break, we compared some players, teams, etc. to Thanksgiving staples. And I went on a very lovely rant about mashed potatoes. Mashed potatoes just being something that you can always count on. They ain't got to do too much, but they're going to come through in the clutch. And guess what? That player was Audi Crooks, and I think that she heard me. And she went on to say, you know what? I love mashed potatoes too, and I love being the person that you can count on. 47 points she had against Indiana in the Coconut Hoops Blue Heron Division Championship game. 47 points, y'all. She's had 40-point games 4 times in her career. It's like casual for her at this point. Mind you, sis ain't shooting threes. She's not putting up threes like that, okay? This is ridiculous work. She has broken her own Iowa State scoring record, and she continues to just be solid. Just like mashed potatoes, just being exactly what you need on your plate. Guys, Audi Crooks is doing it this year. And Ben, you were the one that you said Iowa State's on your radar of being one of those teams that could really surprise us. How much is Crooks' performance helping you in that argument?
I mean, she continues to be one of the most reliable players in the country. They also have not exactly played a very difficult schedule among non-conference opponents, among some of the teams that we talked about, like LSU. Like, they have one of the softest schedules in the country so far. So, a little bit of caution to the wind if I'm going to pump the brakes a tad. But what Audi Crooks has done is so, so impressive. And one of the things that is so impressive about it is that everyone in the country knows that she's going to score around the basket and that she is trying to score around the basket, and yet nobody can stop her, right? That she has taken just 12 shots this year away outside the paint. And guess what? That is totally okay because she is shooting close to 64% around the rim this season, and she is one of the most effective post players, bigs in the country.
She's got the best true shooting percentage in the country. 74%.
Right.
Like,
and everything
that's insane.
Everything revolves around her. You know how she's going to score. You know where she wants to score, and you can't stop it. Like, that is a testament to just how good of a player she is and how good she is playing right now.
Now, Sabreena, the Iowa State Cyclones are 9-0, and as been laid out, the competition's been subpar. But this is something you cannot deny. I mean, 47 points, easy. And she's doing this. She's, third in the country in terms of scoring. And she's doing this averaging 24 minutes. We just talked about South Carolina, all their starters 30 minutes or more. Texas, Rory Harmon, Madison Booker, Jordan Lee, they're playing 40 minutes a game. Okay? Audi's like, let me get half of that time, put up, 20 plus points, and I'll go sit down. Y'all finish out this game. Like, this is crazy. Does it raise their ceiling at all to know that she's not even playing the full amount of minutes that are available in the game and being able to put these numbers up?
I mean, we're still looking at an Iowa State team that gave up 95 points to Indiana, who I don't think is going to make the tournament. So I have a lot of concerns about how easy Audi is letting other people cook.
Okay.
That's still part of it. And
Fair.
Obviously the offense is super impressive. I was looking up some assist stats over the weekend, and Jada Williams has assisted to Audi Crooks 34 times already this season. Like, the next highest number on any team in the top 25 is 20 assists between any one player. So, like, there's a lot of synergy already between, the Arizona transfer Jada and Audi Crooks there. Incidentally, Addie Brown's actually second on that list, but she also plays for Iowa State. So a lot of buckets, assisted buckets going to Audi Crooks. She's making this work. But yeah, the ceiling I just have a hard time with. Admittedly, they have won all of their games, but they haven't really beaten anyone of consequence. And I can't get past the defensive numbers, right? Like 95 points to Indiana it's a big number.
Yeah.
And whenever I watch Iowa State, I'm still I want to be more impressed with Audi Crooks on the defensive end, and I haven't gotten there yet. So, the schedule's going to pick up, right? They are going to be in Big 12 play. They do play Iowa in an interstate matchup, which I'm very excited about because Iowa, shockingly, one of the better defensive teams in the country, something we don't always say about the Hawkeyes, but it's been the case this season. So, yeah, I'm still pumping the brakes a little bit. Don't want to diminish Audi's individual stats, but like LSU, I think there's some context here that we still need to keep in mind.
Can we also plug the Iowa State game a little bit more? It's December 11th. I think December 11th. And that to me is one of the most exciting center matchups in the country so far because Iowa has a sophomore center, Ava Hayden, who's been one of the most impressive bigs in the country this season. And when you look at most
December
improved
10th,
players,
actually.
December 10th. Okay.
It is.
She's been one of the most improved players year over year from her freshman season to her sophomore season. She was a player who this year, I think she has 5 double-doubles this season. Last year, she scored in double figures just 3 times. Last year, she played fewer than 10 minutes per game. And again, she's already set career highs in points. She's already set career highs in rebounds. And, from on post touches, she was shooting at one point more than 80% on post-up opportunities. I think that number has dipped a little bit to 70+%, 73, 75% this year. She's been really good in this Iowa team after kind of ending last season by saying we're not going to play Addison O'Grady and Hannah Stolke next to each other. They've elected to play Stolke and Hayden next to each other, and they've had a lot of success doing it. So that is a front court too that is well positioned to slow down Audi Crooks and Iowa State. It's just going to be a really, really, it's just going to be a really good game of 2 really good teams, and again, an interstate rivalry at that.
Yeah, Hayden's been really interesting because she's listed technically as a guard, but being 6'4",
that can't be right.
Yeah,
that can't be right, Zena.
I'm just saying.
Wait,
but
they list
she
her as a
obviously
guard
does
on the Iowa website?
Yeah, no, on ESPN.
Wow.
Mhm.
That's stunning.
Yeah, right. She does her work in the post, obviously. Of course, when you double your minutes year over year, last year she wasn't doing much at all. We're now seeing her quadruple the amount of points she's providing, her rebounds, just her touch around the basket. Yeah, this is going to be interesting. I'm happy you called that out. And it is worth noting, yes, Sabreena, the defense for Iowa State is the problem. Okay, all right. We'll keep an eye out on that. All right, we got to close this out. We got an interesting update in the world of women's basketball, but from the fan perspective. We'll talk about that right after this. All right, guys, if you are new to women's basketball within the last few years, you may have been ushered into this space during March Madness, during the tournament, namely with the Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, Iowa, LSU battle. But there was something else that was happening around that. There was way more great basketball, obviously, great basketball players all season long, but there were faces that helped familiarize what was going on in the court with what was going on in pop culture, what was going on in the world in general. And those faces were Chiney Ogwumike, Andrea Carter, and the leader of this group, Elle Duncan. And that trio was so much fun. Ultimately ended up being named the quote-unquote Big Three at ESPN, and people fell in love with their chemistry. The guesses of what a team needed to do in the second half on 1, 2, 3, go. How many times Andrea and Chiney were able to communicate on that. Elle Duncan's perfectly placed pop culture references, her rap lyrics, her all these different things. Some lyrics and things that went over our head. We might have been a little too young for some of the references, but overall, just a fun group, fun trio, and Elle Duncan being at the helm of all of that. Well, it's been announced that Netflix saw that. Netflix saw the success of Elle Duncan at ESPN, and according to sources, Elle Duncan and ESPN will fully part ways now, with her moving to be the first officially signed talent for Netflix's newest sports programming. They're building and growing their sports programming. You've obviously seen the football games over the course of the last 2 years. They're obviously having the boxing matches and things of that sort that are coming up. But The Athletic reported last Monday, actually before Thanksgiving, that Duncan was headed to Netflix. And there was still question about could she do both, the ESPN thing and Netflix. Well, according to sources, that is not a thing anymore. So before we get into any more about the details about this, but like Sabreena, Ben, like off the top, I'm sad. Like I am, as excited I am for Elle Duncan. She's awesome. Netflix got a great pick, but I am sad that the trio is ending. It felt like the window was too small that they really got to cook.
I think what's so interesting is that ESPN in this era very much has acquired a lot of big name talents to front face a lot of their big properties, right? Joe Buck and Troy Aikman, Pat McAfee, the Manning cast, and what they're doing with Omaha Productions. And, inside the NBA, most recently on the NBA side. And seemingly with a lot of their studio shows, a lot of feedback that people give is that they're just okay, or they're not that spectacular, or they're not breaking through. And this was a rare example over the last 2 or 3 years of people that they had, in-house, so to speak, or that they have, more homegrown, or that they didn't go out and get, kind of coming together and having natural chemistry and having, a show that broke through into the cultural zeitgeist. And again, it's only been around with the three of them for what, 2.5 years? Like, it's still pretty early on. And so I'm now really interested. Like, they've had this trio that broke through, that seemingly had a voice and carved out space as a leading kind of studio team. And now a key member of that is leaving. How do they backfill her? That's a really interesting question. And what does it mean for their ability to continue to have an entertaining women's basketball studio show? I think that is another, follow-up question, because, it's just worth watching how they choose to approach things going forward and how things will be different. But this was a rare example, I would argue, of a show like this, or of a crew like this breaking through in recent years when everyone had been at ESPN. So kudos to them. And now we see where things go from here.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's also, the fact that trio with Elle Duncan being the forefront face, they were part of ESPN's upfronts, where they basically sell to advertisers what's happening this upcoming season. And they were prominent voices. And the fact that she's now leaving is going to be very interesting to see how that might impact ESPN's advertising numbers. We know that because that trio has done so well, Vibe Check, their like all female led sports show, was basically summoned out of the chemistry that they had created, and also what was going on in the world of women's sports in general. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. Elle Duncan was not only with March Madness, of course, hosted the WNBA finals, and was on SportsCenter. So we'll see what shifts happen in the world of ESPN. But as for now, we wish Elle Duncan the best at Netflix, and we'll see what happens there. I believe her first event will be a Jake Paul boxing event, I believe it is. But whoever's listening, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's going to be the first one that we'll see on Netflix. I'm not a boxing fan, so I'm just going to be sad about the basketball. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's show. We appreciate you guys tuning in. I hope you guys all had wonderful holidays and are excited for college season to continue. We'll be back on Friday. Remember, if you've got some questions about the CBA, what's going on, the deal, the no deal, the extension, what's going to happen with the draft, who knows, or what's going on with college hoops, of course, send them our way for our mailbag. Drop us a line also at our email, nooffseason@theathletic.com. And you can check out the show notes for more information. Follow, subscribe our show wherever you're listening. We want to make sure you don't miss out on our content. And go to our partner at Yahoo. The Yahoo Sports Hub has more content, sports.yahoo.com/women's-sports. On behalf of The Athletic, Sabreena Merchant, Ben Pickman, and Mashed Potatoes, I'm Zena Cada. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to No Offseason. To hear more, be sure to like and subscribe. We drop new episodes every Tuesday and Friday.